Hello and welcome to Stories That Shape Us. My name is Joanna Daniel. Yesterday in Stories That Shape Us, it was Mother's Day in the UK, and the episode was about the toxic relationships that sometimes exist between mothers and daughters. And today I want to continue that conversation a little bit because I know that there are times when you're not the favorite child, when you're not the favorite daughter, sometimes there is a favorite or seemingly a favorite. And I want to talk about that for a little bit because sometimes we don't we don't always understand what's happening, even in that relationship that seemingly there is a favorite. What exactly is happening because we might feel left out, we feel excluded, we feel abandoned and rejected when there is a child that is the preferred special child. And so I just want to talk about that a little bit. And it's a term, as you see from the title, called enmeshment. And sometimes that is what is going on in that relationship. But you are not aware of it. And so you might feel pangs of jealousy. You might sometimes feel rage, bitterness, anger, which is all normal when you feel like you are the scapegoat in the family, where you are the one that everything is dumped on. And there is a person that can seemingly get away with everything that they do. They can even harm you and no one will do anything about it. And the injustice of it can sometimes make us feel angry and we want resolution. But here is what's happening sometimes that maybe you might identify this in the relationship that you see going on with your sibling and with your parent, with your mother. So it's what we call enmeshment, and sometimes there are people that have this relationship with narcissistic mothers or mothers that exhibit narcissistic traits. And sometimes there are people also that do it and say, I've forgiven her. And because I've forgiven her, we have this great relationship right now. But I'm going to break that down a little bit so you can understand that you can examine for yourself whether or not this is a great relationship, whether or not it's a healthy relationship, and what are some of the things that you would be what does it look like if it's unhealthy, and what does it look like if it's healthy? Because sometimes even the person who says I've forgiven my mother and we have this amazing relationship, they're not free to express themselves, they're not free to express their thoughts, they're not free to make their own decisions, and they feel sometimes a lot of fear around self-expression, and they have no autonomy. They don't have freedom to make decisions and to be their own person, right? So is it really forgiveness, or is it fear that I might lose this relationship, or if I do anything that is not what they want me to do, then this I might lose them, and so I just go along with what they want me to do. Sometimes it's the mother that is in this kind of dynamic as well with a daughter, and you might feel left out and not understand that they are not in a healthy dynamic, and so and you're better off out of it, although you have this longing for connection and this longing for belonging. And because none of those needs are being met, it can feel like you're left out on the outside. So what is enmeshment and when does it happen? As I said, it happens in unhealthy relational dynamics. Sometimes it happens with a mother with narcissistic traits. It happens in often in childhood. That's where it starts, where it involves, you probably have experienced emotional trauma, a relationship where there were lack of boundaries, your boundaries were not respected, there was a lack of and a loss of autonomy. No, this person didn't have options and choices, couldn't express them, and so there's this disregard for personal boundaries and a personal sense of self, and this person's sense of self. Okay, so when somebody is in this dynamic, they will struggle to, and these are some of the ways it might manifest itself in adult life: struggle to manage conflict. They will avoid people, lots of people pleasing. Sometimes people pleasing or anger is used as a strategy to to manage relationships. So because now there are other people, as you're adults and we have other people in our lives, there might be other people who want to have a healthy relationships with you, but they won't know how to do that. So how can you forgive somebody and have a healthy relationship? And so I'm talking to now that the person who is in an unhealthy dynamic, and you may have been telling yourself that you're forgiven them, but you see yourself in this relational pattern. You see yourself in the lack of boundaries. You see yourself in the lack of autonomy. You see yourself in the lack of your inability to make decisions. You see yourself in the people pleasing that you do, and the anger that comes as a result. You see yourself in that, and you wonder, how do I do that? How do I forgive them, and try to build a healthy relationship with them? Now, sometimes this might be difficult to do if the next person is not getting any support, is not getting any help, or they can't see anything that they're doing as wrong. So here are some other ways that you might look the enmeshment might look like. So there might be a lack of privacy. So there's no boundaries in your family. When you were growing up, there were no boundaries in your family. Children are not children, that we're not allowed your own beliefs and values. And so even as an adult, you're not allowed to have your own beliefs or values. The parents' self-worth. So enmeshment happens as well when the parent's self-worth is tied up your to the child's achievements. So this is where, as an adult, you're not allowed to choose your own career. You're not allowed to choose your spouse. You're not allowed to choose which university you go to or what you study at university. You're not allowed to have your own values or make your own decisions, as I said earlier, because your parents' self-worth, the mother's self-worth, as we're talking about mothers and daughters, is wrapped up in your achievements. So you feel you're not allowed to end the relationship that is unhealthy, because your mother derives some sense of pride in the fact that you're married or you have a partner. And so that you even thinking about ending a relationship that might be unhealthy for you, that might be abusive for you, is completely off the table. You can't discuss it with her because she doesn't want to know. I've known of mothers who just the thought of it, the discussion comes up and they're off to bed. They're sick the thought of it, because their self-worth is wrapped up in the decisions and choices that you make. And so you are led, or I'm going to say forced, to make choices that are not necessarily in alignment with who you are, because oftentimes people in this dynamic don't really have a sense of self, a identity, an understanding of who they are, because everything is who they are is so bound up in who their mother is, that, or vice versa, that's very difficult to separate them, to know what does she think and what does she think. Nobody kind of knows, because everything is together. You might find it difficult to make decisions for fear of your mother becoming angry or withdrawing. And so your actions are all tangled up and bound up in her wishes and her desires. I want you to hear it in the context as well, that if you, because I started out by saying, you might be the child that's on the outside looking in and thinking this is an amazing relationship and I want a sense of belonging, and I feel rejected from this circle. I'm not a part of it. If you see these things that are present in that circle, then you should be happy that you're not a part of it, because you might have autonomy. You might have freedom to choose. You might be able to make your own decisions. And I know it's really small comfort, but when you know you have those options and your sibling do not, or your mother may not, depending on who is the lead in the relationship. So this person is trained. You're trained into doing exactly what the next person wants to do, and it leads to a feeling of insecurity, because that's where, lack of self-esteem, low self-esteem, a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of not belonging to self, not belonging to anyone really, because in this relationship you don't necessarily feel like you belong, because you have to toe a certain line in order um, for the next person to feel validated or satisfied. And so those are some of the things that are happening. So if you're listening and you see yourself in this dynamic, how do you disentangle yourself? How do you break free from this relational dynamic, this unhealthy relational dynamic? How do you begin to have healthy relationships with your mother, with your daughter, with, and if your enmeshment is with a friend, how do you, or a sibling, how do you break free so that you can enjoy healthy relationships. Now, it is possible. It's going to take work, but it is possible. And that's one of the things I'll pause here to say that at the Come See a Man conference, I will be doing a workshop on helping participants, attendees, to identify their the defining story in childhood, and we will look at how that defining story is impacting your everyday life. So your defining story might be your relationship with your mother, your relationship with your sibling. It might be the father-daughter relationship. It might be the sexual abuse. It might be the domestic abuse. It could be anything. Whatever the defining story is, we want to help you to find that defining story. And we're going to look at how that defining story, the ways that that defining story is impacting your life. So, for example, if your defining story is enmeshment, how is that impacting your life? The people pleasing, the anger, the lack of self expression, the inability to make decisions. How crippling is that when you cannot make your own decisions? But I won't start teaching about that right now. As you see, I'm getting into it. I'm inviting you to attend the conference. You can attend virtually online, or you can attend in person. We would rather you're there in the room with us. It's April 8 to 9 in Swansea, and the details will be below this video. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it will be in the show notes of the podcast. Right, so I'm going to talk now about how to disentangle yourself. If you find out that you're in enmeshment, if you are the sibling that has been looking on and want a sense of belonging, I hope this will help you to have some sense of resolution, that is not a situation that you wanted to be tangled in. That's not a situation that you really wanted to be a part of, because the people in that situation isn't happy either, right? And so they might kind of collude together to shut you out, and you feel on the outside and you feel left out and rejected. But it it's a good thing, not the rejection. I know rejection is not easy and rejection hurts, but because you're not a part of that, you're better off. And I hope that makes sense. So, how do you disentangle? So, first thing I think is work on guilt, especially for those of you who are here. And I know most people here are from the Christian community. Guilt is a massive part of just being able to release, let go of, and to start doing the work of healing. I know when it comes to the mother-daughter relationship, sometimes there's a lot of guilt around healing, because your mother may have sent you to school, she sent you to university, she paid the fees, you have a nice house, you get clothes, you get all the nice things, and you're thinking, and she worked hard. She's a stay alive for you, mother. Am I being disloyal by saying the relationship is unhealthy and I need healing and I need to learn how to create some boundaries? So a lot of women go through a lot of guilt when they get to this place. So the first thing to consider is guilt. How do I begin to tackle this now that I see myself in that dynamic without feeling extremely guilty? How do I do that? So, first, you might need support. You are going to need support in helping you to be able to face all of that and to make the decision to move ahead and to heal without guilt. And then is get help to begin to put boundaries in place again without guilt. Boundaries are really challenging to implement, especially in a relationship where there's already an unhealthy dynamic, when already where you don't have autonomy, already where you can't make decisions without the approval of the next person. And so you will need support in putting boundaries in place, because understanding what boundaries mean and being able to apply them to your life are completely different things. And I believe that when we've never had boundaries, when we've never been allowed personal boundaries, when we're adults saying we would like to put boundaries in place, we have to first also address the wounds of the child where they weren't allowed boundaries. And so that is going to be something that's necessary to get help with. And number three is get help to start making decisions for yourself. Small ones initially and progress to bigger ones. Now, if you're here and you're listening, you're thinking about who can I find to help me to work through the guilt, you're already on that path of starting to make decisions, because you're making a decision around, how do I get out of this cycle? How do I change the course? How do I make it so that I'm not in an enmeshment and I'm not in an unhealthy relational dynamic with my mother or with my daughter? And number four, which is the last one I want to share, is you need help to overcome the fear of disappointing her and to take back autonomy and control of your life. Now, you've never had it, let me say, you may have never had it, and now you're thinking about, how do I get it? I've learned that I'm an individual, that I have gifts, I have talents, that I have thoughts, and I have a right to express those thoughts. I have a right to my own set of values that might look completely different from my mother's and from my parents. I have a right to those values. I have a right to developing them, understanding them, and making decisions based on them. Because my values are so different to my parents' values, the decisions that I make are going to look completely different from what they might make or what they might even want for me. How do I get to the place where I can begin to do that? How do I do that without fear, without guilt? How do I put those boundaries in place? How do I take back autonomy? That is mine. That is my God given right. And I don't feel like I have any. How do I do that? That's why you're going to need support to be able to do it, because often we can't do it for ourselves on our own. So where do you get that kind of support? You might need to find a therapist. You can find therapists via your GP. You can ask for counseling. Most GP practices will be able to refer you. I don't know what the process is. You might have a long waiting list. You can find a counselor via your local register, BACP or the Association of Christian Counselors, or via our website at woundsforscars.com. We have a list of affiliate counselors that we will also work with. But we hope that you'll start this process at the Come See a Man conference, April 8 and 9 in Swansea. Details will be below this video. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join me on the next story.